Now, the second session, we have, as I said, 5 more speakers. The first one is Beningo Beltran. He will be mainly talking about networking with the other agencies. I would like to introduce first the Father Beningo Beltran. He's from Philippines, Central Province. He has been always a grassroots worker with the innovative projects. Known for his work among the rag pickers, at present he is the lead convener for Laudato Si Covenant Manila, Philippines. A well-known person, lot of experiences, and we are eager to listen to you, Beltran.
Good evening. Or good morning, wherever you are. I am Father Ben Beltran. I am from the Philippines. The topic given was about pandemic and prophetic dialogue. I would like to equate prophetic dialogue with networking so that you make a significant difference. Saan ang play? Just a moment, please. I could not see the yung presentation. Kailangan play. Hindi makikita dito.
Naka ano na siya?
Hindi na siya, meron siya.
Present. View share pa.
Hindi, dapat ma-play itong
Ito ba?
PowerPoint. Oh.
Ito.
It's okay. I'll
Ito
just...
ito po ba yung magpe-play?
Okay. I organized the Philippine Sustainability Challenge in the light of the Sustainable Goals of the United Nations. There are 17. Okay, we're concentrating on climate action and life on land. Our inspiration is Laudato Si, of course. And to people we network, the question is, what kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us? So we started the Philippine Sustainability Challenge in the year 2000. When I was in Smoky Mountain, I had dialogue with the poor. I stayed with them for 30 years. This is how the mountain looked like, because 8,000 tons of garbage a day dumped near the sea, leaching into Manila Bay, and there were more than 25,000 people earning their living by scavenging in the garbage dump. These are the children. Many of them die in infancy. Sometimes I had to bless the coffins of infants 2 or 3 weeks. And the young people, they were mostly sick because they have to walk through this in order to sell the garbage that they have recycled. So our constitution said preferential option for the poor. I was told by the society to teach theology. So I taught theology, full load, and then I came back to the dump. So after 30 years, our dreams were fulfilled. They said, we want to live in the same place, in the nice houses. And after I left in 2008, these are the houses that they are living in. This was the fruit of networking with government agencies, with corporations, with state universities. And it started with the Tondo Millennium Challenge, with education for sustainable development, sustainable economics, and a sustainable environment. This is very important for us. In networking or prophetic dialogue, you have to have the same values. And our values are integrity, wholeness, integral human development, solidarity, connection. I am connected, therefore I am. And then creativity, to produce something new so that you can solve the problems and you can save the planet. And our goals is make a significant impact. It's not enough that we work. For example, there are 3.3 million children in the Philippines who do not have enough to eat, and their brains are underdeveloped, they are undernourished, they are stunted. So it's not enough to organize feeding program for 100 kids. There are 3.3 million. You have to think of scale and then how to sustain those. So the goals will guide the objectives and the activities, and the values will guide the practices and the behavior, so that you will have measurable results. That's what I would like to repeat again and again. We would like to have measurable results so that we will know whether our dreams are fulfilled. So for sustainable education, likas kayang karunungan, our dreams, the way we create the future is for 10 million out of school youth to be provided with digital education programs, at least high school diploma by 2030. So this is our target, this kid in Smoky Mountain. You see, the values are there. In providing them with online education, the principles of integrity, solidarity, and creativity are embedded. So we empower them with correct education so that they can assume responsibility for a sustainable future, 10 million kids like this by 2030. And then very important for us would be technology. Utilize ICT for disadvantaged children and out of school youth, provide them with 21st century skills so that they can be empowered to create a sustainable future. Not to us, they will create their own future. That's why our schools should be designed so that the 17 development goals are already embedded also. This is what should be taught, not fill their heads with too much information. We believe that education is the lighting of a fire, it is not the filling with black bucket, according to William Butler Yeats. So our contribution to the networking, to the prophetic dialogue, is that we invented the convergence theory of learning. It is values-based. You see, the values of integrity, solidarity, and creativity are at its core. And then we teach the kids metacognition, mindful learning, analyze their motivation, and then multimodal mentoring, including games and robots. So we teach them how to think. Critical thinking, systems thinking, and design thinking. That converges, and then they will be led towards integrity, solidarity, and creativity. And we start them very young. We have 3 to 5 years old. We had 200 before the pandemic. They're trying to learn in their homes now. We started them with digital responsibility, digital literacy, 3 to 5 years old. And they used interactive boards donated by the German embassy. And then for the out-of-school youth, we teach them how to assemble computers, but most of all, we teach them how to make apps and digital chatbots. That's why the Department of Education in the Philippines is talking to us, because for out-of-school youth, they dropped out because of poverty, and if they are encouraged to go back to school without livelihood, they will drop out again. the alternative learning system of the government, 80% drop out. You know, they already dropped out before, then 80% of them drop out again. But we were almost 80% passing in the accreditation and equivalency program of the government. So we concentrate on online marketing. These are our young people together with the board of directors of the Sandiwaan Center for Learning. They're very happy. They finished a seminar on online marketing. And we also teach them entrepreneurship and online marketing by using games like Minecraft. You see, our partners are the DepEd, Department of Education, Microsoft Philippines, that's us, Sandiwaan Center for Learning, learning to think and thinking to learn. There's Minecraft Education Edition, and there's Felta, who teaches our kids robotics and Lego. We use a learning management system. It's called NEO. NEO Learning Management System just got an award, the best learning management system globally in 2021. So all our digitized modules are placed in the Sandiwaan Center for Learning portal, e-learning portal. The kids can download them and they could study on their own. The teachers just monitor them. These are our kids. During the pandemic, they continued learning. I was able to get hundreds of used iPad. I give it to these kids. And sometimes they have problems with connectivity, but they continued learning English, science, and mathematics. And that's why this is Secretary Leonor Briones, Secretary of the Department of Education. She always invites me for education summits because I talk about 21st century learning, where it is learner-centered now. Before it was instruction-centered. The teacher was the only one who knew everything. It used the factory model, same age, something like that. But now it's personalized and media-driven. It's interdependent, data-rich, and adaptable. Because our vision would be for the kids to be prepared for a future where it will be, our lives will be ruled by digital devices, by artificial intelligence, by blockchain technology, by robotics, driverless cars, drones, and many of the other things of the fourth industrial revolution. So our dream is for the kids to thrive, not merely survive, but to thrive in the global digital economy, even if they live in the impoverished slums of Tondo. And we know we made a significant difference. If by 2030, 10 million of them will be able to play. So the next would be likas kayang kaunlaran. This is sustainable economics, and our significant contribution would be for 1 million organic farmers to be networked with the urban poor through an e-commerce platform and using digital currency by 2030.
Father Ben, this is Father J. Paul. Can you just press F5? Yeah, that is good. Okay.
Okay. So our partners here would be the indigenous peoples in the mountains of the Sierra Madre, very near Manila. They are called the Dumagats. We would like to network them using our e-commerce platform. We are beta testing it now to hundreds of thousands of urban poor like this woman and her child. So the vision is for the urban and rural poor to be connected, values-based again. There's integrity, solidarity, and creativity as the basis of our prophetic dialogue. And then they are given access to inexpensive, quality, basic commodities so that they could lead more fruitful lives towards a sustainable future. She is a dumagat. Aling Nene is a dumagat selling organic fruits and vegetables and rice near Sacred Heart. And I think the Superior General visited her store when he was here 2 or 3 years ago. This is our mission, is to integrate the market, take away the middlemen, and we have done it already in Smoky Mountain. At the back would be 2 tons of chicken. That's gone in 30 minutes already in the houses of the people in Smoky Mountain because of our technology-driven marketing system. So this is our culture, would be integrity, solidarity, and creativity, competencies in online marketing, partnership between suppliers and the customers. Strategic logistics would be the supply chain distribution that is powered by technology. And we have been teaching ladies like this. These are the mothers of those kids already using computers at 3 to 5 years old. We are also partnering with, before Nokia, a few years ago, they were still. So they donated hundreds of cell phones so that these ladies can engage in online marketing. And these are the farmers around Manila, in the provinces. Look at the size of the yams. They were complaining to me that they just dried up, no market. Now they can post it on our e-commerce platform, and the ladies there in the parishes in Metro Manila will order from them. And these ladies, we have just been given our certificate. The name is Laudato Si Consumers Cooperative. Hear the cry of the poor, hear the cry of Mother Earth. That is our motto. And then this is our contribution also. An economic system that's connected to the social system and the ecosystem, because our triple bottom line is people, planet, prosperity. So again, integrity, solidarity, creativity is there. I'm writing a book now. We can root that, we can ground these values in the belief in the Trinity. We have been organizing organic markets already since 2018 in the different parishes in the Diocese of Cubao. And the Diocese of Cubao has given its blessings through Bishop Ongtioko to the Laudato Si Consumers Cooperative. And this is our secret weapon. Do we have order taker and delivery officers in every parish? So they order, they repack, then they deliver to the customers, and the parish is centered. The Department of Agriculture came to us and said, could we make the parish an outlet for agricultural products? And we said yes, because we have this. We have an e-commerce platform, and we have digital currency. So we're also networking with the nerds and the geeks and the programmers, the computer guys. I asked them to make this solutions diagram, and this will give you an idea of how we are doing online marketing from the suppliers of organic farmers to the buyers, the consumers in the parishes. Later on, that will be two-way. There will be a backload that the parish guys, the Utdos, will buy basic commodities from the factories in Manila and sell them to the farmers in the provinces. The Central Bank of the Philippines has also given us operating to permit to operate of Kusing. This was donated to me. This is a digital currency. It's not Bitcoin. It's not cryptocurrency. It is pegged to the peso, and it will give us the ability to do financial transactions completely online. We give the farmers e-wallets, and then if they want to change their money into cash, we have also been given the permission to print ATM cards like this. This is the first one that came out. I have not asked permission from the local superior because there's no money in it. But if somebody will deposit money, I could go to any ATM in the banks in the Philippines and I can withdraw. Okay. So this is Secretary Dar, the one in the middle, Secretary William Dar of the Department of Agriculture, and to his left would be Assistant Secretary of the Department of Interior and Local Governments. At the back would be Undersecretary Christine and another Director of the Department of Agriculture. At my back, I'm sorry I could not see him. He is the Provincial Superior of the Central Province in the Philippines. And the one at the back in blue, that's the one who make our apps for the e-commerce platform. So that's our dream for agriculture and economics in the Philippines. 1 million organic farmers connected to 1 million order taker and delivery officers who will serve millions in the Catholic parishes with food that does not contain chemicals and toxic pesticides. The third dream that we have is to plant 1 billion bamboo seedlings by 2030 and build up the bamboo industry. This is led by the children of Mother Earth. You saw those kids running around in the garbage dump. They are the one. They were born, they grew up in the garbage dump. When I asked the national artists for dance to train them performing arts, so they have been to Europe, up to Stockholm, Sweden 3 times. They have been to the US 9 times. They have been to Japan 6 times. They have been to Australia once. They would have been there in September, but because of COVID-19, we postponed. So the vision, the dream, is the dream of the SVD. A clean and green planet with peace and justice for all children of Mother Earth, GPIC. And the strategy is through the performing arts to call on everyone to join the race to save Mother Earth. It is the only planet that we have. And because of this, they have been designated ambassadors for peace and environment of the Catholic Bishops' Conference. And because they are ambassadors, they were given this whole mountain through a stewardship agreement with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to plant, to replant, to reforest. But because the indigenous peoples and the illegal settlers in the area, supposed to be a protected area, engage in kaingin that slash and burn agriculture, then they make charcoal, the mountain is always burned. And because most of the mountains are denuded like this, Mount Ayaas, this is what happened to the low-lying areas in Manila. The whole highway becomes a swimming pool for Filipino kids.
Beltran,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you at this stage. You have still more 17 slides to go. I would like you to just within 1 or 2 minutes to wind up because we have got many more other speakers.
Okay.
It will be difficult for others because some countries it is already getting late.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make 2 minutes. This is the Dumangats. These are the kids. It's important that the San Bruno Parish in our network with us to plant 5 hectares of bamboo. And those kids using the computers and the laptops, the out of school youth, they plant regularly. That's our seedling nursery. We have organized the people in the area to plant to seedlings, and then we will buy it from them. They earn more than they did before. This is the Guadua angustifolia, iron bamboo, huge bamboo. That's the Philippine giant bamboo. We will process then we will make baskets. Engineered bamboo would be our, this is very, very important for us. Housing made of bamboo, because we need 3 million houses in the Philippines. And the one in the middle is Secretary Simato, Roy Simato, Department of Environment and Natural Resources, discussing with us 5,000 hectares in an island where we have 5 SVD parishes to plant into bamboo, to build up against climate change, against erosion and flooding, and also to give livelihood to 1 million people. So these are the kids. We end with the SVD prayer. May the Holy and Triune God live in our hearts and the hearts of all, so that we can take care of this planet through networking with dialogue partners, because it is the only planet that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Beltran. Well, you might need certainly 2-3 hours to present review, but we are sorry we don't have much time. But as one of the chat box, they had written clearly that your life speaks, and you had shown what is mission in action through your endeavors, initiatives, networking, and also empowering people in different ways. And more importantly, trying to see how that they can survive during this pandemic time with all the skills they have learned, and also what we need to continuously to give to them. Thank you, Beltran. Wonderful presentations. Only I'm sorry again that I have to interrupt you for these wonderful presentations. Okay, now we move on to the next presenter. That is Brother Bernd Alfred Roofing is talking on ministries to the wounded people. But unfortunately, he is not present. He has a very important appointment. Therefore, his slides will be presented by 2 persons. Julia Schuchmann, she is an SVD volunteer. She was in Taiwan and also worked in South Africa. She is a psychologist by profession and currently doing her MA in intercultural theology. We have also another presenter. Both of them will present together. In fact, this particular theme, Jorge Zetino-Salazar is our conference in Chicago. He did his OTP in Germany. Therefore, both of them have a similar experience with Bernd Alfred Roofing, ministries to the wounded people. Over to you. Screen is yours, Julia.
Thank you. I hope you already see my sharing of the screen.
Yes.
And it's an honor to present this topic from by Bernd. It's on the Ministries to the Wounded People, and we want to shed light on 4 often neglected groups that are especially vulnerable. And as we've seen already that several mental health symptoms increase in this pandemic, we want to also look at the impact of the pandemic on these groups. And we start with a statement of one refugee parent, which says, "I'm in constant fear. We live in a communal refugee accommodation. My son washes his hands permanently. He has stopped eating properly. He does not want to leave our room in which 5 of us live. I don't speak the local language. I do not know where to ask for information and where to find support." And this also reflects the impact of the pandemic on refugees, especially in Germany, because most of them have limited access to professional support especially for mental health issues. Furthermore, there are language barriers, so it's hard for them to get information that is up to date. And also there's a lack of technical equipment, which also is a danger to exclude, especially these vulnerable persons. One option is also telephone counseling. And this is also quite difficult for traumatized individuals, as it's hard to handle dissociative reactions that they might experience in counseling sessions. And many of them also don't have a safe space to talk about private and personal issues where they live. Nevertheless, refugees also show a strong resilience, as they also recount previous experiences, like we have gone through tougher times before. So how to move forward from there? So how to support especially refugees is also in providing updated information in various languages, which reduces anxiety, but also uncertainty about the restrictions, the situation that is there. And another proposed action is to stop deportations temporarily and also granting permissions for them to stay in the country, especially during times of pandemic. And also it's important to maintain the support system even in times of lockdown, and identify the protective and risk factors to even support them better in the specific ways. And another thought is that refugees, as they're often lived in shared and crowded accommodations, should also be prioritized in the vaccination procedures. And one aspect that also accounts for several groups, actually all of them, is also to maintain a positive daily structure, even in these difficult and challenging times. Another group that we also talked about or heard about in the other talks are children and youth. And one young person said, "We do not know what to look forward to. Nothing is sure. Having to consider all these options and alternatives leaves no room for anticipation." So we heard before, children and youth are also at special risk for domestic violence, and they also have extreme stressors with homeschooling. And furthermore, even social media or the online might even pose them to greater dangers of sexual exploitation. If you want to read up on this even more, I also recommend you to read the paper by Bernd Ruffing. Another group are elderly people who are often phrased in this pandemic as especially vulnerable. And one sister who works in the health sector also shared her experience as a 90-year-old woman tried to commit suicide today. Corona and loneliness, this is too much. And she's the third suicidal person brought to our emergency room this afternoon. So the impact on elderly people is also huge, especially as they often are isolated and lonely in these times, have little contact to their relatives. And nevertheless, it's also important to not only see the elderly people as weak and vulnerable, and also embrace the plurality of ages. A closer look we also want to take at the homeless people. The little we had was mostly taken from us. Emergency overnight stays reduced their capacities. These places are crowded anyway. Before we would at least find places to sit and eat, now it is all takeaway food. Hard to find a place for shelter. In these times of pandemic and lockdown, everybody heard the saying, stay at home. But it's especially difficult for these people if they don't have a home, not even an address where even infection chains could be traced back, no access to toilets, shower facilities, and even services providing food, water, and shelter were limited in times of lockdown. And many survival strategies that worked before were not longer available due to the contact restrictions. So it was impossible sometimes to get money through begging, collecting returnable bottles, or even selling homeless newspapers. Suggestions to support the homeless people in these difficult times is also to ensure access to support, toilets and showers, and also include these people in the vaccination procedures, getting them access to rapid testing, and also preparing places in case of quarantine, for example, hotels, and also find ways to track homeless in case of infections. To round this up, we want to share attitudes and tips which are based on the principles of acceptance and commitment to face COVID. So in these difficult times where there's little control, it's important to focus on what's in your control. Acknowledge your own thoughts and feelings and come back into your body. Engage actively in what you're doing and commit on actions. Open up, and the actions that you commit to should also be based on your values. And also identify your own resources in this time. And one last point that I think all of us know all too well is disinfect and distance in these COVID times. I will now give on to Jorge to talk about the church commitment.
Thank you, Julia. Good morning, everyone, from the One Word Theological here in Chicago, Illinois. As Father Stanislaus mentioned, I did my OTP in Germany, and I was in the same community with Bernd in Berlin as we faced the first lockdown, the first wave of COVID in Germany last year in January and February. Okay, so the first part is, what do we do and how do we experience this as a church? And by church, I think Bernd means the institutional church, the local church, and those of us who work for and with the church, the institution, and also are members of the body of Christ. So to promote personal prayers, there is more than Eucharist, right? And this was something that became very notable as most of the people that we work with and for and serve in our parish settings were not able to celebrate the sacraments on a daily basis or on Sundays, right? Because public gatherings were forbidden. So this motivated us to create spaces where fears and hopes can be expressed. What happened in Berlin was that our SVD parish in which we live and work what became one of the very few parishes in the Archdiocese of Berlin to remain open throughout the day during the first COVID lockdown. And this was a commitment that we as a community made, the SVD community serving there, community of 10, and it required a lot of work. But one of the things that Pope Francis said at the beginning of the pandemic, one of the comments that really inspired the work that we did in Berlin was that he said that this COVID lockdown should not be a time for vacation for those of us, right? Religious and priests, those who work in and for the church, the institution, but should be a time for us to really get creative and look for ways to accompany the people that we serve, to keep journeying with them. Because if we leave them alone now, we can expect for them to come back to us later after this is settles, right? So this really motivated us in Berlin to take 1 week to really process what was going on and to get to work, to brainstorm. One of the examples is even though we're unable to celebrate the sacrament with the people, we look for ways to remain communicating with them, besides moving everything into a form of, into a digital setting, right, online setting. We were committed to really make the church, the physical building of the church, into a place where people could just come and rest a while, as we here read in Mark's gospel. What happens is that we experience that people were coming to our church every single day, 100, sometimes 200 people that we have seen parishioners in the church on a regular basis, and people that we never seen before and we didn't see again. And that was a beautiful thing. Why? Because this apostolate, right, help us to provide a setting, a place for the people to just come for personal prayer, to experience a way of communicating with God, to come into presence with the divine as something that is more that goes beyond the Eucharist, right? And also those of us who we didn't recognize them, to ask them, okay, what can we do for you, right? It's sometimes we engage in ministry thinking that we already know what the people need from us, but part of dialoguing is to ask them, what do you need, and what can we do for you? What do you think that we can do for you? And that was part of the ministry that we did, this encountering on a regular basis with guests coming to the church. Sometimes we have to close the church at 12, 1 a.m. because people would not leave. And that was a beautiful thing. To save time, we are partnering with Julia, and I hope you don't get distracted when I ask her to click next. So Julia, be there. So church commitment, Bern proposes 3 options as part of our church commitment. The first one is option for those who lose in the pandemic. The second is option for those forgotten in the pandemic. The third one is the option for the scared ones. Next. So the first one is those who lose in the pandemic. As we know, this pandemic has touched everyone. All of us have been affected directly or indirectly with this virus, from this virus. If you live in a setting like the US, right, where we deal with racism and discrimination on a regular basis, right, especially if you're someone who looks like me and sounds like me in the US setting, you're used to racism and discrimination. And then it comes to mind that this virus, coronavirus, is anything but racist and has done anything but to discriminate people, because everyone, all of us worldwide have been affected by it, right? No one has been left behind, unfortunately. This virus was or is very inclusive in the most negative of ways. And what happens is that even though we have to realize that even though all of us have been affected in one way or another, not all of us are affected at the same ways, right? Some have been more affected than others. One of them is women. We have to be very careful, especially speaking from in a German context, but also in an American context, a US context, is that women have been emancipated, right? Women have been going to, they have their places to work, they have their social lives, they have their professional lives. And all of a sudden, they have become, they have been forced to work from home. And by force, it's like many of us have working from home, and they are going into what they do and do very good, which is raise the children, but at the same time, not only educating them as parents, but also educate them as teachers. They have become a de facto teacher in their homes, right? So what Bern is concerned in his paper, when you get a chance to read it, is for us to be aware to not let that happen, to not allow for this traditionalizing of gender roles, in which we see women as simply a housewife and a mother at home, right? We know that women are more than that. As someone who was raised by women, I can attest to that. Single parents are overburdened because it's the same thing. In one of the presentations before, we have heard that these traditional roles of families, are changing. It's more fluid. Family is no longer the mother, father, family, children in the middle figure. Families are small families with a single parent, working hard to provide for his or her children. And what happens is that now these single families, single parents are overborne by that. Another one in the pandemic is the dying, right? Those who are dying alone, and sometimes, most of the time, family members are not able to visit them. Job losses. The poor became poorer, unfortunately. Julia, next. So option for those who lose in the pandemic, right? Let no one be alone within the parish. Let no one die alone. As a devout missionary who was trained at Techni, I did my novitiate at Techni, Illinois, our novice master, Rodney Bowers, we always emphasize that no convert, no SVD should die alone. It is why the practice, the long-standing practice, our novitiate, is that when converts who are actively dying, right, at the residence, we know that they're actively dying, there's always a novice keeping vigil to ensure that this convert don't die alone. And I think that is translatable also for the people outside of the SVD. How can we ensure that no one dies alone? And if they do, how can we continue to provide pastoral counsel for the families who are unable to be with them at the bedside? One of the things is the funerals. Those of you who are priests and understand the power that the sacrament, the funeral rite has, it helps with the closure in this period of grief. And when our families are prevented from doing that, it becomes very hard. So give temporary support to overstrained parents, for example, to parish youth. And the other one is not to overlook the needs of mental health for the Zoomers. And I believe Zoomers are not only those of us who are still studying, who are chained to our desk in our rooms, learning online, but everyone, those of us who are also, all of you who are doing ministry online, there's this Zoom fatigue, right? We become stressed and overburdened by that. The last thing that we want to do is to see going on another Zoom meeting. And I just read an article the other day that those of us who are slowly going back to school in the US, right? Teachers are noticing that there's this component of fear, which we're going to be talking next.
Jorge?
Yes?
Yeah, you have to just wind up because it's already time, please.
Yes, I'm almost finished. Okay. Thank you. So church communion for those who are forgotten in the pandemic. We talk about the refugees, the poor, and also about the environmental issues. Rather than fostering egocentric discourse of individuals, right, we should, as church, be committed to speak publicly for the environment and human rights of migrants, refugees, homeless, and those who are marginalized, who we know well, those who are in this category. Next. An option for the scared ones. This component, the third option is anxiety are increasing, right? There is fear of infection, fear of dying alone. Anyone who goes to social distancing and social encounters are very limited by those in fears. Fear of unemployment. And this is tied to our own social status, because here in the US, you get asked two questions. Where do you go to school? And what do you do for a living? Where do you work? And that places you automatically to give you an status with the social community. And to wind up to the next one, Julia, please. So this is important because what can we do? The option for those the scared ones. In order to support to persist in spite of fear, we are a people of hope, right? Catholicism, Christianity is a religion of hope. And it is important for Bern in his paper not to underestimate it. The fear that we're living in is real, but at the same time, how to contrast that with the hope that our faith tells us to promote the trust, and especially to promote social networks, connectedness, and trust. I think this is one of the main points. Why? Because we have an opportunity as missionaries right now to help change the image of God that some of us may have, the image of a sadistic God, right? A God distant, a God that judges, and also a God who is out to get us. Instead, promote a God that is a God of Hesed, a God that is always connected, a God that is committed to us. And as Augustine would always say, you know, the Lord or God is closer to us than we are to ourselves. So how to promote that connectedness and God to our people? And I believe that will be the last one. And to conclude this, the church does not need to be perfect, but to be connected with people. We are in this process of trial and error, and all of us are learning to minister in this pandemic as we go. So not to be afraid of making mistakes and continue doing what we're doing. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. And vielen lieben Dank.
Thank you very much, Julia, as well as Jorge Zetino-Salazar, for your presentation. Especially, you're talking also from your own experiences, what you had in Germany. Of course, you have elaborated many points regarding children, youth, elderly, homeless people, and our church commitment at this stage. Finally, you concluded saying that be connected with the people. That's what other speakers also keep on repeating. Listen to the people, be with the people. And that is the message we are carrying today further. Thank you. Now we move on to the next speaker, Ozanan Vincent Carrara. He will be talking on ministry and environment, new approaches, ministry and the environment. Father Ozanan Carrara belongs to Brazilian Northern Province. He has a master's degree in philosophy at the Catholic University of São Paulo and a doctorate in philosophy at the State University of Rio de Janeiro. He teaches philosophy and environmental ethics at the Fluminense Federal University, Brazil. Screen is yours, Ozanan, and I would request you, please keep the time, just to 15 minutes or so that we could also have other two speakers in time. Thank you. You have to unmute your mic.
Thank you, Lazar, for your invitation. Can you see my slides? Is it okay?
You can see, yes, go ahead.
That's okay. Okay. So I will share a little bit more about the theoretical reflection on environmental ethics. I was coordinating justice and peace work here in BRN for 6 years, till 3 or 4 years ago. And I was very interested in accompanying very closely this work with resistance to mining industry, especially here in Minas. So this is a little bit theoretical, but it is also what I could see in their work. No? So I will try to read my reflection here, and then we will see till I can go. Just a moment here. Yeah. So Pope Francis, as we have said here several times in Laudato Si, showed a great preoccupation with our common house in the center, and put this in the center of evangelization. A new world where humanity may survive depends on our way of comprehending, relating, and using nature and its resources. The current pandemic shows that our planet has reached its limits, and urgent measures must be taken to save it, and also to save humanity from a possible extinction. Thus, missionary activity can no longer ignore the environmental issues. This has been very well expressed in the SVD General chapters by making JUPIC as an essential part of the SVD mission, by emphasizing integrity of creation as a condition sine qua non for humanity's survival. Here in Latin America, we search for inspiration in the pre-colonial culture of buen vivir, good living, inherited from Andes indigenous people, among other traditions. In Brazil especially, we have Leonardo Boffi, a theologian, liberation theologian, who is here in the picture with me 2 or 3 years ago. Chico Mendes' struggle in the Amazon. In Europe, we have a lot of philosophers dedicating their reflection to this topic, especially Hans Jonas. I will try to speak a little bit about his ideas. Michel Serres from France, and several others. In Africa, I know, and I don't have a profound knowledge of that, but Ubuntu culture is also trying to include environmental issues. In Australia and the USA, I know a little bit about Aldo Leopoldo from Wisconsin. He has a book also translated into Portuguese about his own experience with environmental issues in his farm in Wisconsin. And he became a reference to the ethics, environmental ethics thinkers in USA. In Australia, we have John Passmore and also others trying to relate feminism and ecological thinking. So I think in all of our cultures, we have a lot of fountains to search for inspiration in our work in regard to environmental issues. I will try to put some ideas here about Latin American ethics of buen vivir. Developmental mentality and dominant economic model have thrown us back into the old extractivism of the colonial times, imposing a unique model of production, consumption, and appropriation. Its consequences are inhuman poverty, social inequalities, and environmental destruction. So I tried to gather some points to talk about the demandings for an equal democracy. And that's what some people, some movements are talking about here in all of our countries, I think all over the world. Especially one condition is to respect moral dignity of human beings and also to recognize moral dignity in natural beings. This is one of the first conditions. Another one, sustainable politics and development alternatives must contemplate the rights of future generations. This is the topic of Hans Jonas, and also nature's rights. Also, it is necessary to impose limit control of agribusiness and reinforce popular resistance to mining industry. We actually, with Verbo Filmes, we prepared a DVD, I think 3 years ago, about churches and mining in Latin America. The Pope Francis and the Cardinal from Ghana, who is responsible for justice and peace in Vatican, are much more involved with these environmental issues, especially the mining industry here in Latin America. This model of development has submitted countries from the South, transforming them in mere suppliers of raw and cheap materials, such as petrol and minerals to the northern markets, the only owners of the technology of exploration. So what are the alternatives proposed by the Buen Vivir ethics? The constant accumulation of resources and the maintenance of high levels of consumption must be left behind. Some steps to walk in this direction pass by the decolonization of thought so that other models may be invented. The wealth of a country must not be measured by PIB or by per capita profits, as this excludes communitarian economies with another kind of production and propriety. So we have all over the world, especially I know a little bit about their reflection, especially in France, the movement for the commons. I think also in the Anglo-Saxonic world, this is very strong. It is a movement to protect the common goods of humanity, including the vaccine. Some people consider it a common good to be protected, disturbing governments and enterprises from appropriating them. All these groups and movements defend the principles of cooperation, conviviality, autonomy, self-governance, cultural diversity, and participative democracy, social appropriation of the commons, solidarity, food sovereignty, reciprocity, organic and familiar agriculture, against the principles of free concurrence, centralization of economy and production, importation of technology, transformation of natural resources into commodities, individualism, privatization, and unlimited extractivism. Other proposals, all the movements and the experience have taught that it is necessary to give less power to governments and more power to society and grassroots movements, encouraging the creation of a common good public politics, new ways of producing, distributing essential goods, building stronger social relations, encouraging self-administration of local territories, and strengthening socio-communitarian and ethical ties of economies, avoiding excessive bureaucracy and centralization. So here in South America, our big problem is what we call extractivism. This model dominated during all the colonial times. Now, extractivism is a model of extracting and producing raw material, which does not respect nature's cycle.
Ozanan, now you can unmute your mic and speak. Unmute your mic.
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So extractivism is a model of extracting and producing raw material, which does not respect nature's cycle of renovation or reposition, being the level of extraction too intense. This mechanism was abundantly used during the colonial exploration of South American countries. This level of extraction does not aim the internal market consumption, but exportation without respecting sustainability, causing the exhaustion of resources. Intensive mining, for example, is never sustainable as minerals are not a renewable resource. So what are the alternatives for us? Limits to extractivism, control of the voracity of the North over the South natural resources, which may demand less development or less industrialization in the northern countries. This primary economic model turned exclusively to external markets must be abandoned. Also, a solution passes by a diversified local economy, able of generating local employments and at the same time respecting nature and local cultures. This is only possible by making stronger the internal markets and the local domestic production. What can Buen Vivir ethics offer? So this ethics, which has been elaborated now by all these thinkers in Latin America. It is an effort to decolonize thoughts and to demarketize life, resisting to neoliberal economy. It also reacts to the modern dualism between man and nature, so characteristic of Western culture since Descartes, proposing a reconciliation with nature, so denominated here Pachamama. The name in Quechua language from the equator, Sumac Causai, and in Bolivia in Aymara language, Sumacamanha, means full life or life in plenitude, in an ideal of harmony between the spiritual and the material, harmony also with itself and with others and with Mother Earth as well. The principles of Buen Vivir affects positively also education and the economic and social states structures. From oral origin, it has been translated into written tradition so that it may contain the germs of a new paradigm of civilization. It has fed the movements of resistance of indigenous people against threats to their culture, traditions, lands, and nature. Also, local legislation has consecrated Buen Vivir principles in the constitutions of the Equator and Bolivia, as I know. In Paraguay, there is a tendency in linking those principles with Guarani's utopia of the land without illnesses. So one theologian, he's a priest from the Congregation of Sacred Hearts, the Onion. He studied a lot about the Guarani culture. He shows 4 dimensions in this ethics: search for communion and solidarity between human beings, reconciliating interests of society and nature. This is a social dimension. The society's well-being is measured by capacity of preserving nature and people's coexistence with nature, economic dimension. In the place of accumulation and concentration of material goods, enter cultural goods that give meaning to life, cultural dimension. And as last, besides the material goods necessary for a good life, also is important the spiritual well-being and the transcendence ideal. These 4 dimensions interact to create a new and harmonious system of coexistence and reciprocity. According to Regazzoni, the Guarani cosmos is not ordained by an interest of utility or exploration, but by a festive context of gratuity and reciprocity, where it is important a relation with transcendence, but also a relation of solidarity with one another. Leonardo Boff, our theologian, also regards the Buen Vivir ethics as a sufficiency ethics for the whole community and not only for individuals. It supposes a holistic vision integrating human beings in the great earth community, which includes humans, air, water, soil, mountains, trees, and animals. It demands a profound communion with Pachamama, Mother Earth, with universe's energy, and with God. It is a permanent harmony with the whole universe. Those Buen Vivir principles has been translated also for the Amazon reality, where the forest people are inspired by the spirit of cooperation, solidarity, self-governance, and their territories, based on ideals such as abundance, valorization of traditional knowledge of indigenous people, assuring it and good living in their lands, a harmonious life without pride and vanity, searching self-sufficiency in food and basic goods within a collective structure of governance. Some thinkers found similarities between buen vivir ethics and ecologists' thoughts, such as that of Ignacy Sachs, Edgar Morin, Capra, Boff's ethics of care. Boff's told us here, he helped a lot Pope Francis to write Laudato Si, because in Brazil, he is the writer who does a lot of contribution to environmental issues, and he has a lot of books now on environmental ethics. Permaculture and deep ecology, who has been reflecting on this subject since the 70s. At the other point, I will try just to point out some points of his reflection, is Hans Jonas.
Yes, Ozanan, yes, just
Yes.
to point out a few points because it is already getting late. Just a few points you could pick up and summarize, that would be nice.
Okay. So he's a German philosopher living and teaching in the USA, I think in Chicago, proposes an ethics which he believes is capable of responding to the problems of the techno-scientific civilization. And that is also capable of reaching an universal acceptance in the face of the dangers that threaten the existence, the essence of humanity and of nature as well. So I prepared some slides here, but I think there is no time to present all of them. So I think I will go to my conclusions. You have the paper, you can read. His book is very much used. Principle of Responsibility has been translated into several languages, and he belongs to the Jewish Christian tradition. So he has a lot of things to say. And I think he would be of great inspiration to our work with environment. So some points, my conclusions here, challenges to our SVD mission in regard to environmental issues. So JUPIC must be the priority in our SVD work of evangelization. Thus, we must get involved with ecological movements, resistance to mining movements, as here I was involved with this a little bit here in Minas, familiar agriculture or organic agriculture, indigenous movements, quilombolas here. Quilombolas are the former slaves' descendants, and they have rights to their own lands, threatened now by Bolsonaro government, also the indigenous. Small farmers movements, solidarity economy movements, reinforcing environmental education and of our communities in our school and parishes. Second point, Vivats. Now, I worked with the sister, Holy Spirit sister, who was there before while I was JUPIC coordinator. Now, Vivat must actuate to pressurize European and North American countries and also other developing countries like Japan and China to diminish their ambitions over the southern countries' natural resources, to respect human rights of native people, to repair natural disasters caused by their companies, to denounce their violations of human and natural rights in international media and the United Nations. And last, I had an interesting experience in this topic. Now, I received a mail from the manager of Styler Bank. She wanted information about Anglo-American company, a very strong company exploring minerals in Minas. We had just finished that DVD about churches and mining in Latin America. And she asked me, do they respect human rights and do they cause environmental disasters? So I got from the movement, I think 8 or 10 videos and sent to her. And she replied to me and she said, we won't accept anything from them, because we know that they don't respect human rights and they don't respect natural rights in Latin America. So that's a little bit some points I thought they would be useful for your reflection and work on environmental issues.
Thank you very much, Ozanan, for this presentation. Certainly, there are a lot of theoretical knowledge need to be translated into the action, especially from Bon Vivir and Hans Johannes into our JPIC activities. Well, that's a huge challenge ahead of us. I thank you for your reflection as well as a presentation.
Welcome.
Since we are running short of time, I think I move on to the next two presenters. Then we will see if we can take up some questions later. So we move on to the next presenter, Paul Dogba, a response to racism and other discriminations. Just to introduce him, Paul Dogba, he belongs to Ghana province. He has a doctorate in moral theology from the Pontifical and Royal University of Santo Tomas, Manila, Philippines. He is currently a lecturer of moral theology and missiology at Saint Victor's Major Seminary, Tamale, Ghana. He also teaches many other related subjects. Now over to you, Father Paul. I only request to you, need not to present everything what you have prepared, just to, precise to just 15 minutes maximum. Thank you, Paul. Kindly stop the screen sharing, Ozanan. Okay, fine.
Thank you. It's covered.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, it covered the weight. It covered this. I cannot see from this.
Paul, you
Okay, my topic for presentation is response to racism, discrimination against the poor, political manipulation during the pandemic, authoritarianism and anti-democratic policies of some countries under the excuse of the pandemic. Okay, in the first place, to deal with this topic, moral, theological, and ethical actions is needed to respond to racism, discrimination against the poor, political manipulation during the pandemic, authoritarianism, and anti-democratic policies of some countries during the pandemic. One needs moral, theological, and ethical actions reminiscent to Jesus' response captured in Luke chapter 4, verse 18. And that is, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim release to the captives, to preach the good news to the poor, recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed. So this response of our Lord Jesus is against any manipulation, is against any vice against the poor in the world. Because if we take it from there, then we go down to the COVID-19, we could see that just like MERS and SARS, COVID-19 spread exponentially across the world, infecting about 200 million people and killing about 3 million people. And this called for a necessity to respond to some elements which is making it impossible for this sickness to be out of our system. And that is racism and discrimination against the poor. So over here you see in the picture, Asia is not a virus, racism is. It means that the virus which we are facing now in this time is racism, not even the corona, as this placard pointed it out. So we could see that to live together in this era of the pandemic, Pope Francis said something which is very, very important, the universal communion. As a part of the universe called into being by one Father, all of us are linked by unseen bonds and together form a kind of universal family. So if you live in a universal family, everything must be done in a family way, and everybody should live according to a family life situation, as pointed by the Pope. And with that in mind, the prophetic call to engage injustice in the world through actions on behalf of the poor, marginalized, or oppressed, and vulnerable members of the society is something which is in the heart of the society of the divine word. So the divine word missionaries all over the world goes around doing work of justice, peace, and not only that, but integrity of creation, meaning that the created peace of this earth will be used judiciously so that the generation to come will also have a role to play or a part to use. So if we look at what Pope Francis said, it has a kinship with what Pope John Paul II said. He said the preferential option for or love or preference for the poor, which is an option, a special form of primacy in the exercise of a Christian charity to create the whole tradition of the church bearers' witness. So Pope John Paul, who is now Saint John Paul, look at it as a primacy. So it is a primacy to take care of the poor people. So we can see from the picture over here, the poor people living in that condition in a garbage. So how can we live an affluent life seeing people in this way? So to respond to the issues of racism and discrimination during this time of the pandemic, a recognition of a familiar bond granted by God requires that we resist effort to normalize inequality, poverty, economic exploitation. But that which was said by Professor John Wills, professor at Pilberg University, what he said over here is very, very important because now we normalize inequality, we normalize poverty, we normalize economic exploitation because it has become each and everyday activity. So it's no longer having any impact on us. Also, it has become a normal thing for us, and we need to do something to end this normalization. So when we go from there, we see that racism and discrimination proceed from prejudice and depraved sentiments. That's why it's very difficult for us to fight it out and to put it aside, especially during this pandemic time. I would like to quote what Nelson Mandela said. He said, I fought against the white domination and I fought against the black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in a harmony with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and so to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. So what Nelson Mandela said over here is something which is very, very important, and it is something which we as Christians need to carry out to fight against any form of racism or discrimination in our world today. So when we look at it again, we could see that the racists, they have their source. Racism have their source in defect of mind, as much in the vice of the heart. Their defect and the vices lie in the attempt to craft a world where one can stand above the fray. So that's what they want to do. So if it is like that, there is a question we have to ask ourselves, which I will come to. Racism and discrimination result in dismissiveness and a lack of concern for others, evocative of a Cain's response, am I my brother's keeper? So you can see from the picture over here, the gentleman is trying to help somebody who is falling down into the valley. So we are all called to be the keepers of our brothers. Because COVID-19 stigmatized and annihilates groups of people based on culture, sex, gender, political, and economic status in a society or in a global community. So we could see that there is a discrimination in the manufacturing of the COVID medicines, because the Africans felt that their doctors and their medical personnel are discriminated against because they were not involved in manufacturing of the COVID vaccines. And because of that, they look at it as an alien vaccine because we are in a hot climate. So the question is, how can the vaccine coming from a cold climate, with everything taken from there, be good for the people in a hot climate? And that question is what many people couldn't answer. And that is what is giving the people some kind of idea that the vaccine is not good for them. And many of them will not like to take it because of that idea, the discrimination. And now we see that the effect of the pandemic, one of them is a lack of effort to curb the spread of the disease. As you see, many people moving for their daily bread, so you cannot just stop them. The budget trimming leading to limited grants and job loss, and also low productivity due to the lockdown. And also we could see that in a world deeply fractured by injustice and inhuman living conditions, our faith calls us to recognize the presence of Christ in the world and the oppressed, since discrimination against them undermines their integrity and dignity. So we could see the disproportionate nature of COVID-19. The rich and the powerful in our countries were offered privileges or privileged treatments. The poor were exploited with COVID-19 survival materials. Food distribution was on partisan basis in some cases where people were accused of that. And then the Pope, John Paul II, our saint, said that solidarity is a firm and a persevering determination to commit oneself to common good. That is to say, to the good of all and of each individual, because we are all really responsible for all. So the responsibility for all is what we have to carry out, especially during this time. Seeing Christ in the poor, we have to see Christ in the poor. The church can still do more, especially in advocacy towards government responsiveness, due to the fact that government, especially in Africa, were tending to mind more about the economic recovery to the neglect of social protection for the vulnerable populations. So there is an anti-democratic policies and political manipulations and authoritarianism felt also at this very period of COVID-19. So according to Pope Francis, true statecraft is manifest when, in difficult times, we uphold high principles and think of the long-term common good. So this time we have to think of a long-term common good. The autocracy of the powerful move to dictatorship of abuse and apathy is also destroying the world. As you can see in the picture over here, a big man, a powerful man with a long fingers, try to suppress the people. He suppressed them, they were under his finger. They cannot come out from there. And they have to do what he asked them to do. And that is what we see in this COVID-19 period. Developing countries raises red flag of moral problems concerning the COVID-19 pandemic. The dangers of authoritarianism, anti-democratic policies, political manipulations, inequitable distribution of vaccines, mismanagement of government relief packages for the needy, police brutality in the name of public safety, which in Africa left some people dead by guns, in order to prevent the people from contracting the sickness. some of the African countries decreed, and some people were gunned down. They were shot to death because they were trying to cross. So it's no longer the COVID-19 which is killing, but the law, the rules kill people. Killing one person to save the life of many people is not morally accepted. So the media has also been manipulated in many ways to suit what the authorities say. So as you can see, the gentleman over here is trying to flash all these things which are in the red flag so that we can live in a conducive atmosphere to fight COVID-19. The SVDs are not left out. As you can see from the pictures over here, we have our SVD students from Tamale community. They are engaged in sensitizing the people through the supply of PPE, sanitizers, face masks, food items, and also they move ahead with a truck hired, preaching to the people to respect the COVID-19 rules, to create an indisputable awareness in the community, especially in the villages around Tamale. So they are doing all these things. And we want to thank our Superior General and his council for deeming it very important to supply the Ghana province with a fund which we use to fight the COVID-19 in some of the areas, as you can see, is over here. Superior General and the Council, thank you very much. And also to receive COVID-19 pandemic as a rating continuum of injustice that comprises autocratic, marginalizing practices and power relations hostile to the fundamental rights of the poor and the vulnerable in the society. So in order to do something, we need a practical theology of a salvific eschatology to respond to some of the issues. That is to strengthen the basic Christian communities, especially in parishes, the linkages and the networking among the NGOs, to promote justice at the grassroots level, prioritizes the disadvantaged people, to promote justice, equity in marginalized communities. Ministries are deeply rooted in sustainable development strategies to respond according to the signs of the times. And also we could see that the virtue ethics is very, very important in dealing with this pandemic at this very time. So virtue is a habitual and a firm disposition to do what is good. It allows the person to perform not only the good acts, but to give the best out of himself. And to conclude, if the leaders in the world are possessed with the virtue of prudence, which is the vehicle of all the virtues, the moral virtues, of all the virtues, they will be able to discern and choose the right means to achieve what is good, what is just, and what is beneficial to their various countries in the ravaging COVID-19 pandemic period without discrimination, racism, authoritarianism, and political manipulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for raising many questions. As you can see, even in the comments, they said you are raising many questions and many issues related with this. These are all to be, responded collectively. Individuals cannot really respond to these many questions regarding racial discriminations and the connected issues, especially during the COVID time. Thank you. Now we move on to the last speaker. The last speaker is Anthony Llyod. It had been a marathon session. This is the last speaker. Now we have come towards the end. He will be talking, engaging with religions and government and policies. He is teaching at the Lux Munti National Major Seminary of Thailand. In addition, he is the executive director of the Asian Research Center for Religion and Social Communication, St. John's University, Thailand, and the chief editor of the center's scholarly journal, Religion and Social Communication. just to be brief, and I respect your presentation. Anthony Leduc.
Good evening from Thailand. We're almost 11 o'clock p.m. here, so I will get straight to the point just to save time. The COVID-19 pandemic represented a particularly urgent need for religions to take an active role in addressing the crisis. And although the pandemic has been a time in which religious institutions was as much victims of the crisis as they were agents of addressing the problem, the conditions of the pandemic oftentimes disrupted the ability of religious leaders to engage with their followers and to communicate with one another. In my presentation, I will discuss the different types of engagement and also the different kinds of engagements. So the first type of engagement is within the tradition, within the religious tradition itself. For the Catholic Church, ecclesial communion traditionally depended on regular activities that sustained the life of the church, such as physical gatherings for liturgical and non-liturgical functions, parish pastoral programs, and other outreach activities. And having these familiar ways severely curtailed by the pandemic, church leaders oftentimes turn to information and communication technology. The second type, this digitally mediated communication and presence, though lacked the intimacy and closeness of physical presence, provided a level of comfort, consolation, and assurance to the faithful that church leaders continue to be close to the sheep and still had the smell of the sheep in the common pain and suffering that all were going through. The second type of engagement is with secular institutions, and that would include political and NGOs and various bodies. In a meeting with religious leaders in May 2020, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said religious leaders, in my opinion, can play a pivotal role to deliver solutions to not only address the pandemic, but to recover better. And he calls for religious leaders to leverage their networks and communications capacities to support governments in promoting WHO recommended public health measures, from physical distancing to good hygiene, and to ensure that faith-based activities, including worship, religious ceremonies, and burial practices comply with these measures. The third type of engagement is with other denominations and religious traditions. And religions engage with each other in order to address not only the pandemic, but any other issue plaguing humanity. For example, the ecological crisis, poverty, social injustice, gender inequality, and so on. During the pandemic, not only people within the same religion found themselves isolated from one another, inter-religious dialogue and engagement also became limited and restrained. And oftentimes religions were pitted against one another. For example, the Shincheonji Church of Jesus in South Korea was blamed and vilified for causing the outbreak in South Korea versus the mainstream Protestants. And this was also seen in the case of Muslims versus Hindus in India. Now I go to the area of engagement. In this area of engagement, I like to propose three actions. The first action is communicating an interreligious message. The task of religion is to address religious spiritual questions that naturally arise during any serious crisis with orthodox religious and spiritual principles and theology. And this is to discourage religious sentiments and practices that are contrary to common sense and science. In the picture you see is someone licking the gate of a shrine in Iraq in order to prevent the coronavirus. Now, when there is engagement among religions, what happens is that spiritual principles that can appeal to a plurality of an audience can be communicated. And an example a good example of someone who does this very well is the Dalai Lama. For example, in his August 10, 2020 tweet, the Dalai Lama said, "As soon as I wake up in the morning, I remind myself that nothing exists as it appears. Then I think about sentient beings who want happiness, but experience suffering. I generate compassion for them, determined to help them as much as I can to eliminate their negative emotions." Now, this tweet can be written at any time in any event, but with the background of the pandemic, someone who reads this tweet might interpret it in this reality and gain something from it. And so with religious engagement with each other, these kind of cross-cultural, interreligious kind of sentiments can be communicated that helps people from a variety of backgrounds and cultural contexts. The second area of engagement is communicating truthful, scientifically sound information to the public. Religion still holds a position of authority, not only in religious and spiritual matters, but also other spheres of life. And religions have long been involved in areas beyond the religious domains, such as social and economic development, peace and justice work, and environmental sustainability. And the presentations that we have heard in these last 2 days proves this to be true. But wise and capable religious leaders realize that while they have the trust and the loyalty of their congregations, they need to collaborate with experts who have the necessary knowledge in order to present sound scientific information and to help shape effective community policies and actions. The WHO said religious leaders are a critical link in the safety net for vulnerable people within their faith community and wider communities. Likewise, Antonio Guterres encourages all communities to promote nonviolence and reject xenophobia, racism, and all forms of intolerance, meaning religious communities. So the need for religions to collaborate with local and international political, social, and scientific bodies in order to communicate credible information and to adherence is extremely important to addressing the issues surrounding any dilemma facing humanity. By doing so, religion not only helps to impart accurate information to the public, but also galvanize and encourage public participation in actions beneficial to self and the community. The third area of engagement is communicating examples of proper behavior to the people. An example is in the first wave of the pandemic in Vietnam, which took place from March to May last year. Masses went online because churches were closed, as in many other countries. And in these online masses, people noticed that the celebrant, either a bishop or a priest, often wore masks while celebrating mass. And some were puzzled as to why this was taking place, because in the sanctuary area, there was nobody standing around. And the celebrant did not seem to be in any danger of infecting others or being infected. So an online discussion ensued in social media as to why this was happening. What was the need for wearing a mask while celebrating Mass? And it turns out that most of the comments seem to believe that the reason the priest or the bishop was wearing mask was not because he was in any danger itself, but that he wanted to use this opportunity to model a proper behavior for the people, especially for Catholics who might be averse to wearing masks, either in public or especially in church, where they think that wearing a mask might make it seem less holy or less proper. So this kind of modeling reinforced the normalcy and the necessity of wearing masks. And we didn't just see this in Vietnam, we saw it in many different countries. And in Thailand, we also saw Buddhist monks online and in various platforms wearing masks. And even when they're doing rituals in the temple, they also wear their masks. And this was also a way for them to protect themselves and also a way to model proper behavior to religious adherents. And we also see the same with vaccination. When the popes had their vaccines, there was news about it. When His Holiness Dalai Lama had his vaccination, they took pictures, they took videotape of this event. So this also reinforced the necessity and the safety of being vaccinated. But of course, modeling proper behavior is also in other areas beyond the pandemic. And this relates to the post-pandemic situation, which requires proper behavior modeling in environmental awareness, in various aspects of life, consumption habits, etc. Now I will, the last part of my presentation is on recommendations. I have a few recommendations. The first recommendation is consistent communication strategy. Religious followers should know what to expect from religious leaders in terms of content and messaging, as to be able to rely on them as a regular source of information. For example, the head monk Yovivedas Swami at the Nyastin Temple in the UK consistently gave his daily briefing following his religious rituals, helping his viewers to recognize the value of tuning into his broadcasts, not only for spiritual nourishment, but also for useful knowledge that they might otherwise not have access to. And this was especially true for the Hindu community in Britain, in which many older members did not have a strong grasp of English, and thus depended on the monk who could speak their native language for regular updates. The second recommendation is staying abreast on various dimensions of issues with accurate information. Religious leaders and organizations who do not carefully study contemporary issues and stay updated on the latest developments can easily become the source of misinformation and disinformation. In the photo is Pastor Chris from Nigeria, who preached that 5G network is responsible for the coronavirus spread. This is even more dangerous considering the status of religious leaders within their respective communities. Unfortunately, from North America to Africa, many religious leaders have been found to be purveyors of misinformation, both online and offline. Fortunately, we have religious leaders who try to not do so. Mufti Ismail Menk from Zimbabwe, in his YouTube broadcast in August 2020 said, "You can't just say, I rely on Allah and then do as you please. That's foolish, that's ignorant. It's the height of ignorance, even if bearded men are telling you that, bearded men are telling that to you. It's the height of ignorance to say, don't do anything." The next recommendation is being active on social media and other internet platforms. The world of social media is an extremely busy and ever-changing and competitive environment full of distractions. Religious leaders who occasionally go on social media to post a message or a video clip cannot expect a large viewership unless they have a wide distribution network that can help accelerate the content's reach. And I've seen very, very many videos, productions by SVDs, which are extremely good and extremely valuable. But when you go and look at them on YouTube, they have 50 views and 150 views. And the ones with a lot of views may amass 1,000. But most of them are in the hundreds. And we see that that's not an extremely high reach in terms of social media. Inactivity or sporadic activity online ultimately reduces visibility, reach, and influence. Thus, digital literacy, wisdom, and active utilization of information and communication technology is essential to engagement among religious adherents and with the global public. And my final recommendation is working to closing the digital divide. Nearly 40% of the global population do not have access to the internet. The digital divide also exists between gender and age groups. Incidentally, Indonesia is one of the countries with the greatest gender digital divide in the world. Certain sectors of the population are therefore left out of essential knowledge propagated by political, social, and religious institutions via internet platforms. The reason we're able to have this webinar these last 2 days is because all of us have access to the internet. And even though we heard earlier in the night, I am connected, therefore I am. What about the rest of the 40% of the world who are not connected? Do they exist? Are they important? So is this something that we need to address? So therefore, the church and religions can play an active part in engaging with other religious and secular institutions to close the digital divide in order to promote better access to important information for social and spiritual well-being. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Anthony Leduc, for this wonderful presentation. Certainly, you have raised many questions and many other ways in which that as a religious leaders, as well as dialoguing with the other religions, that we can show certain models and move ahead. I'm sorry, at this particular stage, we are not going to take any questions because we are already running out of time. It's already reached, here in Rome, 6:05. Therefore, I want to conclude this particular meeting. I'm sorry for the second session speakers that we are not able to take the questions. It would have been a great opportunity to dialogue with you, but then I'm very sorry about it. Therefore, I would like to just to wind up this session with giving thanks to everyone, all the speakers and all the participants. We are sitting here almost 4 hours. Therefore, it would have been a great session, long session, mind-blowing, at the same time, also inspiring, finding ways for our mission in the future. I like to thank, first of all the speakers. Much more particularly, I would like to thank our translators. It had been very hard, especially when the speakers were really rushing through to finish their presentation in time. The translator, Father Damien and Father Maxwell from the Generalate, and they had been doing wonderful service. It was a challenge for them. I would like to thank both of them. Also like to thank Sony, who was trying to assist us in the translation. I'd like to thank especially also Brother Carlos, who led the prayers this afternoon for us in Rome, and also raised certain questions and answers. Now you had seen a lot of questions. In case you want to have the communication dialogue with the speakers, I can provide the email services to you. You can just contact me. You can directly ask them the questions and they may give an answer to you, the different inspirations as well as different problems which had come up. Thank you very much. With this, we close our session. And then we just to say thanks and thanks for everyone. I would like to thank, there is one person behind the scene here is Sister Christy, who is helping us from the SEDOS Institute for this virtual session. We are using their platform. They have been constantly admitting the persons, especially those who were entering in. Thank you. May God really bless us that we could have a great and wonderful presentations and great listeners like you. Let us just conclude, just in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you.